Hey, welcome to Scotch for Dummies. Tonight, we're going to be discussing our re-review of Ardbeg Uigeadail. We're going to be discussing the SWA, who are they, and why should you care? We got some good conversation. All four of us are here tonight. Stick around.
What's up, guys?
Hey guys, Scotch for Dummies here, and look, there's four of us.
There's four of us here.
There is
Back
all
to
four
dummies.
Well, I guess
At least
apologies on my part. Apparently, Alejandro was right. I messed up the timing. I don't know what's going on, but hey, it's good to see you guys.
We are here.
Happy
It's his
Thursday.
first time.
Happy Thursday.
It's his first time.
My
I
first
feel
time.
like it's, we could use an unpaid intern, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
Cheers,
it's only been
everyone.
5 years, so, you know, we're not good at this yet.
All right, you guys.
So, wowzer, let's see who's on and
Keep it up.
get things started. We've got a pretty good show tonight. We've got an interesting topic. I think half of our subscribers are going to have a really good clue as to what we're talking about. The other half, and maybe some of our listeners in the podcast, are going to be like, who, the what, the why, the...
I think it'll be an interesting one to just discuss how people feel about them
Yeah.
and what they do, and there's a lot to delve into, I think.
It'll be fun.
It'll be interesting.
We're going to dive into this guy, a re-review of Uigeadail, which is some fond memories of the first review of Uigeadail, and see what happened with it. I hope you guys all watched the review already and find out, know where we stand on it, because it'll be a good conversation. But anyway, let's see who's here. There's already lots of comments. I hope Alejandro's here, because he was on the pre-show, and I want him to know that, yep, we screwed this up.
Oh, wait a minute. So YouTube, thank you, Scotch down there says, no, YouTube has been messing
Yeah,
schedules
see.
up. So, okay, because I thought I said it correctly, but
Well,
who knows?
Damn, now I owe Drew an apology. How
Dang
many
it!
apologies
You can make me a drink.
You go right back there and get that Dean Stew 20.
You shut your hole up there.
Oh, happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Good to see you.
Thursday.
Who do we have online here? So we've got just
Steve
scroll to
A.
the top.
Well,
Malt Minion, hang
Bob
in
H.
there, buddy.
Mario D.
Mario
Hey,
D.
Mario.
Hey, Mario.
Likes to keep it clean.
Kevin Bloom, Scotch down under. Bobby J, good to,
To
see you
drink
again, Bobby
bourbon or
J.
scotch is the... No, Kevin's
Hoagie's in.
Scotch.
Gin lovers. Wow, yeah, that's what we're here for, Hoagie.
Gin
We like
lovers.
gin.
Well, we're drinking peated whiskey tonight, Hoagie. Maybe something that you're not
Yeah,
as
the
interested
Scotch
in.
Whiskey Association loves gin. That's a big,
Yeah,
that's
sure.
one of their big
Yeah.
things.
Kevin says, to drink bourbon or scotch?
I like gin.
Well,
Or
drinking it
gin,
tonight,
maybe,
but,
apparently.
you know.
Yeah, maybe gin.
Both.
Just
Rhetoric?
no. Hey,
Kevin
Zach.
Rhetoric.
Greg Bowers.
Saw him
Tom
earlier.
R.
Hey, Greg.
Four Dummies, wrong. Well, it's not the wrong bar. It's a different bar.
It's a different
Different.
bar.
Different.
bar.
It's going to be a rotating bar.
And we saw George a few
Brienne's
seconds ago.
here.
Is Brienne here?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Hey,
the better
look,
half
I got,
of Sunday Evening Sky.
I did some tweaking on the gear. Apparently it looks pretty good. That's awesome.
George
Good.
Cap. What?
Ooh, that's very nice. Justin O's giving Drew a compliment.
All right. High def. Yes, finally. So crisp and clear.
That's
Hell
really
yeah.
good. Oh, time out. So we got two things to say here real quick.
Yeah,
First
we
and foremost, Whiskey Mystery. Good to see you. Hope things are safe there. We watched that video literally like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, check
and
it out. Orange.
Of
man.
Living on Mars.
It's like Half-Life.
yeah,
Yeah, that too.
thinking about you guys out there and hoping you're safe. And then Zach Andrews. Hot diggity.
Cheers to that.
Way to start us off,
Zach Attack.
Thanks,
The
sir.
Zach Attack's in the house, man.
Pete
Thank
is in
you,
the
sir.
wheelhouse.
Pete is in the wheelhouse.
Drinking a little Ardbeg 10 to start it off. Good stuff.
So,
All right.
let's get into the Ardbeg. Let's talk
We
about it.
should probably start the podcast.
Podcast
first,
is
right?
always a good
Are
start.
you ready to do that?
Yeah, yep, that's 3, 2. What's up, guys?
Hey guys, it is
Hello.
Scotch for Dummies.
4 guys on a Scotch journey to help you with your next Scotch purchase. I am Drew.
I'm Sean.
Mark.
And I am Andrew.
Welcome to the podcast, everybody. Welcome. What's on the schedule tonight, guys?
This is so much fun.
We got all kinds of stuff going on tonight.
Ardbeg!
We got the Uigeadail.
Let's start at the very beginning.
All right.
The beginning of our experience with the Ardbeg Uigeadail. Do you want to talk
The
us
what-
through
what?
the first bottle?
So I'll talk. I'll get us to your bar.
Wait
I'll
a
tell
minute, before for that, We're also going to talk about the Scotch Whiskey Association.
Yeah, the SWA, who they are, why you should care.
It's a really good conversation.
It is a good topic, and if
Yes.
you don't know anything about them, stay tuned and
We'll
really
get to that
listen
in a
up.
little
This
bit.
is going
And
to be
this
a
will
fun
segue
conversation.
into that,
Yes.
I'm
Right.
sure.
Back to Ardbeg.
But so Ardbeg Ugadale, I have no idea why I bought the first bottle. I don't know what caught my attention.
Yeah, what did catch
Because
your eye?
honestly, we'd never really dove into a peat.
I think that you had heard something or read something about it, and it was so different. It was so different from what we had normally done, and we hadn't done anything from Ardbeg, and it might have been on. It wasn't on sale
No, it
because
wasn't.
it
I
was
spent-
expensive.
I think it was $79.99 when I bought it, and I saw it on the shelf, and I'm like, "Oh, this is coming home."
That was a big pull for us.
And at that time,
It
we
was.
were so new to the game. We were literally all bringing things to the table
Well,
every week. We come in
peated
and be
whiskey,
like,
baby.
What's this? You know?
Johnny Walker Black was our peated
Oh my gosh!
whiskey.
Yeah.
I still remember going back even further when I first
That's
started
true.
drinking, and I was like, a Scotch that is, and I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about this. And Mark invited me down to his place, and he had all these Johnny Walkers out. I couldn't even drink the Johnny Walker Black.
Oh,
It was
you
so
couldn't
smoky
take it.
and peaty for
Couldn't
me.
take it.
So now compare that to the Oogie. That's like night and day.
So I picked this thing up in the liquor store, and I am super geeked. I'm like, I cannot wait till Thursday. I'm bringing this. I mean, these guys.
That's
are gonna
gonna do
freak it. We get over, and I'm like, look at this, and we all gathered around your bar.
We couldn't even
Lights
pronounce
were
it.
we were
down.
excited.
Yeah.
Like Wagadi.
Opened it up, and without even putting our nose close, we were like, what the holy crap? You know, how can you drink
What are you
it?
doing?
And I don't think any of us really took to it right then.
No.
It's like, this-
We should probably go
That's
back and
being
watch
kind.
that.
I mean,
See
we
how
were
it
all
went.
like, who the hell drinks this? Really, this is something you should burn.
Actually,
And that was before reviews.
I was just gonna say that was
that was
before
just
we did it.
when
So
we
that-
were hanging out. And so
Oh, it was before
yeah,
Yeah.
our very
this
first
that
review.
was
It
long
sat on the
before
bar
we got
for
a
like
camera.
like 6 months to a year before
Yeah.
we drank it.
So our review of this bottle was after we had started doing reviews. We were a little into
84.
the peated. You were definitely into the peated. That was
Yeah,
your
you were always
wheelhouse.
there.
But we had all experienced it enough and understood it enough that it wasn't off-putting when we tried it the second time.
Yeah.
I mean, we had finished a bottle. We might have finished 2 bottles before we got to the review.
At least one, yeah.
But it was our very first experience at Isla. It was our very first experience of a single malt peated whiskey.
Yeah.
Had we not done even
Okay.
Lafroig or
I
Lager
think
by
we
then?
I think we started.
Man,
No, I
well,
think-
we probably tried a
Not
couple of
to
those
this
at like
level.
whiskey
Oh,
events,
could be.
but I don't think we had purchased and brought home
Right.
a
I
bottle
would say
to
the Oogie is
drink.
probably the pinnacle point in our peated career, if you will, of really getting into the Isla, what it's all about. Because this definitely is
Hit it
pure and
strong.
simple. It'll
But-
punch you in the face in the Isla.
And
side.
because it was such a visceral memory, at least for me, I mean, I vividly remember when we opened that bottle and the whole basement smelled like smoke, and we're like, "What is going on?"
Right.
And so it was such a visceral memory that I still, to this day, compare that bottle to anytime I'm having a peated whiskey. Like that's the benchmark, and which is interesting.
So I didn't realize in my memory that this bottle was reviewed so far down after we'd started doing it. So the bottle we actually reviewed was another bottle.
Yep.
Because what actually ends up happening with that original bottle is it sits on your bar forever. And then finally we go on a camping fishing trip, and we get around a campfire and with a couple of stogies out, and the next thing you know, this thing's going down like liquid gold, right? I think we killed it and went on to some bottled and bond that night.
Yes, we did. No, we saved some because we wanted those guys to experience it because you and I were the only ones drinking.
But so we came back to this 80 reviews in.
Yeah, this is like 84 or something like that.
Okay,
So this
because
is a
the
year and a
review,
half
I just
in.
looked it up. Yeah, 2016, and it was 3535353. So I mean, it was a 3.28, which is still that's a pretty stinking high review
Yeah,
number.
absolutely.
And thinking back at our first reaction to it, to what our first review of it was, is night and day.
Yeah. But I think it's one of those things that you can't, you know, we always talk about people that want to try peated whiskeys, and we tend to steer people away from really heavy. Like, I'm not going to send you to an Ardbeg or a Lagavulin. Like, let's come at this from, you know, maybe
Light.
something that's lightly peated. You know, let's maybe go up and try a Highland Park.
Right.
You
Or
know,
a Wolf Burn.
Yeah,
Something that's-
you know, something that's not quite as heavily peated, not to scare you off, to let your palate acclimate to what peat is, so you can appreciate it.
Yeah.
You know, but then again, there are people that jump in with both feet and are like, I love this peated stuff. Where do
Yeah.
I get more? So I mean, it's definitely
It's like, oh, okay.
a personal journey.
Now let's begin.
Right. But
I
for the
think
most
those-
part, I think that
Yeah.
you know, a lot of the big heavy distilleries on Isla, it's difficult to start with a lot of those.
Oh,
barrels.
sure. Yeah.
Leave that for a second. That's your 10, right?
Yeah.
I want to compare
The
this.
thing what I like about this
So-
is they've added that they've intensified the sherry balance into that peated whiskey, and so it brings out a really visceral balance
amazing.
between that sweetness and that
Oh, it's
smoke.
there for sure.
And if you do this with a cigar or a pit campfire,
yeah,
it brings
yeah.
down the smoke and the sweetness just pops
It
big
blends.
time.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that was the big revelation we had. I think it was the cigars that we
It-
first
it
had
was.
that at your house in your backyard, smoking a cigar. When we brought the Ugadale, I was like, well, maybe we could try it now. And then
That's
we saw
right.
all of a sudden, it's like,
That's right.
what? We didn't get any of that
It
before.
would,
Right.
And we haven't honestly done a review or anything like that after smoking a cigar. I mean, there's no doubt that's a whole different game. Like
Yeah.
you can get in this like serious cigar smoking and stuff. But to your
Yeah.
point, there's nothing having a stogie and an Isla Scotch. You really get some.
But look at the color difference between the 10 and the.
Which
the,
one is
Well,
the 10?
that's the sherry.
Ugadale.
That's a
Yeah.
sherry.
Yeah,
Sherry.
I mean, look
for
at the
sure.
10 is
Yeah.
so clear. It's
Yeah.
almost like water. I mean, it's amazingly clear.
And that's the only. I think we said in the review that's the only age statement. Is that correct?
Ugadale's
ten.
that age.
No,
the
the
10.
10.
The 10,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
The 10 is the only, which is crazy. to
Except for the
think.
wee beastie, which is
Which
a
is
five.
now
five.
a 5.
That's
That's true.
true.
Well, they've got the 23, I think, or it's 20 something,
20-somethings,
but
yeah.
it's 23 years old. But that's an offshoot, I would call it.
Mm-hmm.
But I just the color difference is astronomical.
See,
Well-
Whiskey Mystery said Deepa was straight into the peat. And, you know,
I
it's
was
funny
too.
because I don't think they're definitely in the minority, but there are definitely some people that we've talked to that are like, oh, yeah, I loved it the first time I tasted it. And you're like, really? That's.
I mean, that's what I loved about Johnny Black when I was just doing blended whiskeys at the time. It had that smokiness. It
Different
just,
palates.
So
Well, and I've noticed a lot of the people that really can appreciate the peat, like right off the bat, it's a lot of women. And I don't know if their
Really?
palates are, I mean, their palates are definitely different than men's.
I think they're more sensitive,
So-
to be honest with you. Which
But I wonder if they get some of the complexity, because a lot of the peated whiskeys are fairly complex, and so if that's the draw.
I'm assuming
Um,
Deepa drinks black coffee and dark beer. I mean, I
right.
guess.
That's
I mean,
probably. a
I
good
drank
statement.
black coffee and dark beer, but when I first tried the peated whiskey, it was a little much.
Yeah.
And I mean, I
That's true.
taste all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, but
and-
you've got a more refined palate than 99%.
But normally I can just power through it and like it kind of is what it is.
Okay.
This is the style, you know what I mean? And so it kind of took me off guard still.
So, I'll tell you what, man. I started off when we started talking about Ugadale. I had 10 in my glass, and you know, you had made a comment in my left ear here. You know how much you really enjoy that 10. It's wonderful, and I was thinking,
10's great.
and I was like, yeah, it is. It really is. And I finished it off, rinsed the glass out real quick, and went to this. I love Ugadale. It's
It's
just,
so good.
I mean, seriously, it's the 10 with a little extra, and I
With a
just,
lot
I
extra,
I
yeah.
just
Well,
like,
and
oh,
the
I
sherry
love it.
kick, too,
Yeah,
right?
it's so
I mean,
wonderful.
we didn't really even talk about sherry too much until we started drinking this again. And then I think you said it during the review, it was a sherry bomb. I'm like, it kind of is.
It's a peated sherry bomb.
It kind of is in that factor. It's so complex. Like you know, you get into some of these Islas, and they're usually kind of one dimension. This has character. It has something to build upon, and it's, I think it's decent ABV, right? What is
46?
it? 46. Well, no, so you can still play with it somewhat, but I mean, so complex what you're getting out of it.
you know what the other thing that probably threw us off when we first tried the Ugadale was that it's 54%.
Yep.
And that was back before we drank a lot of
Oh,
higher
that
proof
probably
ABV.
bumps up too.
We're 40,
you know,
43%
yep.
at that time.
And we were like, that's all you need. Why would
Right.
you want to go higher than that? We should put a big ice ball on it.
And we did, and we had all different shapes and cubes and
That's great,
squares
man.
and spheres, and that was all
Oh, we
good.
used to rate. He had an R2D2 or something.
I
ice
had
ball.
Death Stars.
Death Star,
And
yeah.
I had all kinds. I had,
Someone just commented yesterday.
I had
on the
TARDISes.
video. They said, I subscribe solely because there's a TARDIS in the background. Whose is that? And I'm like, it's Sean's, and he's quite fond of it. But I mean, it's just, it takes me back to when we started, what we were doing.
Dark Belgium Trappist yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
Rich, potent
so at the end of the day, I think we rescored this one. I know I gave it a 4, which is kind of crazy.
Right.
And
So
you guys
went
only
from
did 3 5s.
You went from a 3 to a 4, and we all stayed at 3.5, which is still very consistent when you look at it from a scoring perspective.
Yeah. I think I basically have just adapted my palate, appreciated more things.
Well, and you talked about that right at the beginning when you were talking about Johnny Walker. Your palate has probably matured the most of the 4 because I mean, at the very beginning of the journey, you were really standoffish to Scotch in general. I mean, honestly, the only thing that brought you into the game was Mac 12.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And at that time, by the time you got into Mac 12, I'm already 10, 12 different bottles of Scotch in. He's already been a Scotch drinker since he was 21 or younger. I don't know why, but what the hell.
Why does a 21-year-old?
Right. But anyway, so I think you the one that came in the greenest.
Probably.
And so
I would agree. Yeah.
Right, which means you had more room
I mean,
to grow.
it's almost safe to say I'm the reason why we started because his house
Yeah.
hit the 12, and I'm like, hey, I've never had it before.
Let's talk. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, I want to learn about it. That's we're kind
Yep.
of started the tradition.
And we did.
So.
And then we killed a whole bottle at
Look
your
at us
kitchen
now.
table playing cards or something. I don't remember what it was.
Well, it's probably you.
So what do you
You can make that into a T-shirt.
What's that?
Time and relative dimension in Scotch.
Yeah, that's true.
It's bigger on the inside.
I like that. That's a
So
good one.
there's a lot of good comments coming back with Bobby J says Oogie was my first peated Scotch as well. Had a dram at the bar. The waitress said she hates pouring it, and my wife
I love
said,
it.
"What the f- are you
Bobby,
drinking?"
you're perfect. I love the comment.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
And that's
exactly what you
ideal.
And
get.
Scotch on the Bite says most all of my whiskey girlfriends love smoky whiskey. So
I'm telling you, I have
Interesting.
seen a lot of people talk about, not just on here, but like just in articles in general, that there's a lot of women that when they try the smoky whiskeys that they enjoy them more off the bat.
Yeah.
That's funny, Zach.
Why do you want to let them drink up all your booze?
That's a good point. But it's funny. My wife can definitely tell when I've poured a peated Scotch in a base.
oh,
you
yeah.
reek,
Yeah.
you
Oh,
reek
yeah.
of it. Yeah, it's like a campfire. You can't not smell of it. I
Right.
mean,
You're not hiding it by any means.
Yeah.
But interesting conversation. And I think you did make a point that I wanted to bring to the light again, that Ardbeg is interesting to me because it really only has, now two.
I think there's a 19-year-old too that Steve
But
had mentioned.
it-
But still, technically,
the vast
in their
majority
core,
of their core-
in their core, there's one bottle.
Right.
Well, now it's
You've got-
two. We beasties now.
you've got
Four.
Anno, you've got Ugadale, you've got Corey Vrecken. Those are the kind of their big core brands.
And they're all non-age, and they're very all success. They're
And they're
all
not-
very successful in
No,
their own
good.
right.
And they're not overly expensive either, for the most
No,
part.
they're in that. What,
Well, for a
nine?
non-age statement, it is.
Well,
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that they are the poster child for doing NAS whiskeys correctly.
Sure. Oh, yeah, that's
They
a good
have a
point.
good product. Nobody complains about it. Nobody says a word about Ardbeg.
Being non-age.
Yeah, putting out NAS bottles or whatever because they put out really good bottles.
yeah, I mean,
And so I think if you're putting out good quality whiskey, nobody cares.
that's the thing.
Well-
It's high for a non-age statement, but it's not overpriced.
Well, and Hoagie mentioned about cast strength and how
Love you, Hoagie.
how it's so much value. It's true. Like even what Argument does at the Ugadale, what's the Corey Vrecken at? It's probably
I don't have. We don't have.
We
the
don't have.
Corey.
We have
I
Anno.
should have
Anno's
brought it.
at
No.
46.6.
I want to say Corey Vrecken is higher than.
it might be even around the same. But the point is that they not only do they give you an NAS with complexity and stuff, they also give you to a pretty damn good ABV, so you can play with it.
Yep.
And then it really opens up. I mean, with water. So I mean, that's
It's got depth and
That's extra.
complexity, and it's nice. And I don't care if it's I don't care how long it's aged. It's a good Scotch.
On that topic, this morning I was talking to a colleague at work on Teams, on a little headset, and he's a bourbon drinker, lives out on the West Coast, and I haven't talked to him in months. And we got to talking about Uncle Nearest. I don't know if you know about that bourbon, right?
I have bottles on my bar.
Good for you. Anyway, and I asked him if he'd had some, and no, and I pointed him that direction, and we got talking, and he had made a comment about having a problem spending a lot of money on a non-aged whiskey. And I said, hey man, we have this conversation all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I can argue both sides of that coin for you. I said, but at the end of the day,
58.
I want to say to you is close your eyes, and is the whiskey good? And is the whiskey good enough at the price you paid for it? I don't care if it's got a statement on it or not. Does it taste?
Doesn't even care about the brand.
Right. Is the quality of that whiskey in your mouth and on that nose worth what you pay for it? If it is, then who gives a rat's rear end how old or how young it was?
Because I can point you to some age statement scotches and bourbons that are way too expensive for what you get in the bottle.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Way too
Absolutely.
expensive.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a double-edged sword.
It
you
is.
know? But at the end of the day, I think that Ardbeg puts out good quality whiskeys at a reasonable price for what you're getting. Like, I've
think so,
never
too.
felt that I've
I think
gotten
so.
ripped off buying a bottle. from
Right.
them.
I
It's
think
not for everyone.
the only bottle that I felt was overpriced, or I was like, man, you guys, you kind of freaking put that one above my reach, and I was upset. Was the 20-something. I mean, it was, it was a 23-year-old bottle, but it came in at like $5.49.
Yeah, it was crazy.
It was good, though.
I was good, but man, come on.
I will say that
$20 an ounce?
the drum was probably not.
That's the only one that's been a letdown for me.
Yeah.
I was not.
Well, Grooves wasn't.
Groups was pretty good. It was okay.
The drum was not.
Drum to me was weak.
Yeah.
Is it still part of their?
Dude, that Dark Cove
No.
was fire.
Yeah, the dark Cove
Yeah.
was delicious, but
I don't think
I haven't seen the drum anywhere.
I
down
haven't
here.
seen the drum either. So that would be a gift whiskey. Those are exactly, Tom. You're right. If it's a gift, you don't worry about the price. And I think where I know where you're going is you actually gave us some of that 20-something, and that's how we were fortunate.
Oh,
And it was
yeah.
amazing.
And it was amazing.
God love you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. I
think
wish
that's
I
why-
had a
I think
bottle
that's the
of it.
point he was making.
I get it.
So at the end of the day,
I wanted
Ardbeg,
to buy a bottle.
Ardbeg does some damn good stuff. I think this review this week was solid. I really enjoyed drinking it with you guys again and kind of re-reviewing it.
That's
Right.
At the end of the day, if you've not been into the Ardbeg line, do yourself a favor, get into it. Be forewarned, it is a trip. It's something that you're not going to just you're not going to kind of wade into the water in this thing.
Yeah,
You're going
I'm
to
going
jump
from
right
margaritas into Ardbeg. No.
This is gonna,
I love this name, Dram Bam Thank You Ma'am. I don't know if I've noticed Dram Bam Thank You Ma'am on before, but that is awesome.
That's pretty good.
And drum is still available on shelves in Houston.
There you go.
I'm sure that's out there in a few places, but not great. And that was kind of the consensus from everybody. Anyway, yes, I agree. Ardbeg, awesome stuff.
Go for it.
So let's pour another dram. I think I'm gonna go from Ugadale to Anno just
That's
to see
what I
what
just
happens.
did, and it's
Not as good.
not nearly as good.
Oh,
You should have finished with
You
this.
should have started with it.
That's all right. So I'm gonna do that, and let's.
You know what we should talk about before we get into the SWA?
What's that?
Buying a house with your scotch.
Oh, you
Oh,
want that's so
the Scotch for the news?
So we didn't actually prepare any Scotch for the news links and everything, but this did come up several times on my feed, and so Sean's
Yeah.
reminded us. Yeah, let's talk about what happens here.
All right, so this gentleman, when his son is born, goes out and buys a bottle of 18-year-old Macallan with the year statement on it. I think it was 72, 74.
74.
And so he thought it would be nice to buy a bottle every year for his son's birthday for 18 years so that on his 18th birthday, he would have 18 bottles of 18-year-old scotch to drink on his 18th birthday. Seems like a lot of scotch to put down on one day, but I'm game for whatever.
I'm
So this guy, when he's an adult now, I think he's in his 20s, and he took his whole collection. He's going to sell it at auction to put a down payment on his house, and so we've had some text messages going around about it because number one, it's would we have made it? Would we have not opened those bottles?
Hell no.
I don't know.
No.
Not us four.
Nope, not happening.
Here's what I say. If it was now, absolutely you would open it. If you were like 23, I don't know if I'd open that. Like I at 23, 24.
I wasn't drinking Scotch at 23.
To be fair, I've been drinking Scotch a long
No
time.
way.
But I don't know that I would have been like, ooh, 18-year-old Scotch, let's bust this open. Because
No way.
I just don't think that I would have been into that. And if I could sell it and buy a house, I
think
probably would have done
I think
that.
it's a pretty practical point, though. I mean, if you're buying your first, is it his first house?
Yeah, it
If
is.
you're buying your first house, that's a freaking big punch in the gut. I mean,
So
that's a
apparently,
big punch in the gut.
Scotch
If you got a
and
way
Irish
to do
say-
it.
His family told him not to drink them. And then
Right.
he's
His dad
26 now.
specifically told him not to drink
there were
them.
instructions.
Yep.
Right.
And so, I mean, I think that it's interesting that he's doing that. Estimated value is $53,000. So I mean, it's a chunk of change, and it would be difficult
That's a PMI.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would probably do the same thing, but
I would have too.
I mean, on the other
It'd
hand,
be hard, but
it would be interesting to just sit on that whiskey for 10 or 15 or 20 years and maybe think about your dad and open a bottle every now and then. And, you know, that's the kind of gift that you can't replace. Like,
Right.
you're selling that off.
Right.
So, you know.
Yeah, but that's getting you into a house.
although I'm sure his dad's smiling down saying, "I just help you buy a house." That's pretty damn
Right.
awesome
So
too.
interestingly enough, let's talk about this. Dad bought 18 bottles of 18-year-old Macallan. I don't know what 18-year-old Macallan cost in 1974. I know what it costs today, and I think it's overpriced. But let's just say he had 18 bottles. What's the
I think-
actual? What was the
I think
cost?
that they said that he spent, it was either, I want to say like 2,000 or 3,000 pounds. It might have been a little bit more
okay.
than that.
So let's just say
I can't
2,500
believe- I mean,
pounds.
that's 1,000. That's
And
that's
20
100 pounds each.
1974, yeah. And
But
No
dude,
way, that's
they
so
were
much.
giving away scotch
That's
in the
what I'm saying.
70s and 80s.
Yeah.
So it's 18 bottles
But-
at 50 pounds a piece. That's
But
only
when you get into the
$900.
2000s, brown liquor's
he
hot
never
again.
made it to the 2000. He was born in 1974.
So he would have been 18, so 2002.
Yeah, that was starting to come back. But what is
No,
18? What does 18-year-old
1992.
Macallan go for now?
Oh yeah.
18-year-old Macallan.
250?
Yeah, it's in the 250 range.
Yeah, but I mean,
18-year-old
so that's what
Macallan.
I'm saying. And so, you know, at 100. Okay, so even if it's we'll say 2,000.
Say 2,000
but
pounds,
even
and now it's
still,
5,300, and now it's 53,000.
$6,000.
You must not have gotten them all on time, man.
Either
So-
way, it's a good return on your investment.
That's what I wanted to make a
Right.
point of.
And then-
I mean,
I mean,
I don't
that's-
care if you're
That's
putting
buying
your money
stock
in
low and selling high.
yeah, who cares what the actual commodity is? It's got a pretty damn good
Well,
return.
Well, I
Now-
was gonna say if it was
to be fair,
it was bottled in 74. It was not purchased in 74.
right.
Or no, it was
distilled
It was
in
distilled in
74.
74 because he's only 26 now. Because
Right.
he was born in 74,
Right.
he'd be 46.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a difference.
Tom Marr saying Mac 18 is $350 a
That's
bottle now.
ridiculous.
So-
Macallan has just pumped their
Such
prices
a-
up.
What nobody in the story has talked about is the fact that his dad kind of lucked out in the fact that he bought Macallan,
Oh, totally.
right?
Well,
so,
or smart.
well, but here's the thing. Like, let's say Dad went to the liquor store and he was like, "I'm gonna buy a bottle of 18-year-old Royal Salute," right? Same thing,
Or
right?
Buchanan-
Like
Buchanan
18-year-old
18.
Scotch.
Dewar's 18,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know, like it doesn't have to be, but I mean, he splurged and got a nice bottle, so I get that part. But I mean, he was helped by the fact that it was Macallan.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Because
no
if it
brainer,
was,
'cause
there's only a
timing
few
is
labels
perfect right now
that
for
would
Macallan
have
buy.
increased in value like that.
Oh, yeah.
Macallan has played the market well and played the game, and
Macallan is the Tesla of the freaking.
they really are. They play.
Scotch.
And you know, it's kind of like finding mint condition comic books. Like they bought these to save them. It wasn't, you
Right,
know,
to
they
read.
kept them in a safe, secure place. They preserved them well. They had all the documentation, I'm sure. So for an auction, like that's a big deal. You
And it's a
know,
collection, and
yeah,
it's
there's
all
Oh,
promised
so
to
Jack
go
Andrews
years.
says that was a 28-year bottle set.
Oh, really?
He didn't
So-
do it just for 18 years. He did it for 28 years.
So he kept going.
and that makes more sense on the value of 53,000 pounds. But
It's a feel good story.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, it was a fun
You
story to talk
it's-
about.
It's interesting.
I
so-
had the first person that brought it to my attention on Facebook was I know you know him, Tom from the pub crawls.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Tom. Anyway, he sends it to me, and I replied to him on Facebook Messenger. I'm like, "Hey, Tom," I said, "I appreciate it. Great story." I said, "But if I'm that guy, I'm living in a cardboard box because I drank that scotch."
Yeah.
See, I feel like
Now
you
you
open it up
would.
and you're like, "Oh, this smells like tire too," and like put the cork back on it and just set it to the side and.
This from the bunker commander.
Yeah.
He's got a bunker of scotch. Like, no, I drink it all. You don't drink it all.
Dude, I go through it as much as I can, but you can only freaking have so many open bottles.
Yeah.
That's funny,
Fair
Tom.
enough.
So you don't know that maybe this guy's dad bought 2 bottles, one to drink, one to keep.
Ooh, that's a smart man. That's the way you do
I'm gonna,
things.
you know what? I'm gonna go with this wee beastie again. Give it
All
a
right,
more
I'm
shot.
going and
Good luck with
we'll see
that.
what happens. So let's do a 90-degree turn here, guys, and talk about the main topic, and that's the SWA.
What is
Yeah.
the SWA? What does that stand for?
Scotch Whiskey Association.
Scotch whiskey.
And just what the hell is the
It's
Scotch?
the
whiskey
Avengers
thing?
of Scotch, or
We
the
we were having a a discussion Andrew and I
It
were
was. It's
before we
really
started, whether you would consider it a trade association or a political action committee. And I think it's kind of a little
Both.
bit of both,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, the one nuance that Sean talked about, that he doesn't think it's a political action committee, because we don't know if they like contribute to the campaigns of different.
They do lobby.
They do lobby.
But
I-
that doesn't mean
okay.
do they contribute, like, I'll give you $500 towards your next campaign.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know if they do that.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I don't know.
So they do lobby for sure. They're definitely a trade group. A trade group lobbies.
And that's
in
lobby,
Congress
yes,
too, yeah.
for sure.
So this association, they have over 70 members. You have to be you have to be involved in the wholesale distribution of whiskey to be involved with them. So you have to basically be a distiller, a blender. You have to,
Independent bottler.
Or a wholesaler.
yeah, or a wholesaler. You have to be
Part of-
You
yeah.
can't be a cooper or involved in transportation or marketing
Retailer.
or
Wow.
anything. On those side businesses, you have to be involved in making the whiskey itself in some fashion.
It spawned out of the Bars and Wine Association.
1912?
1942.
Well, it was 12. It was wine.
was
and
the
then in
Wine and Bar
1930 is
Association,
and
yeah.
Then they changed it over to Scotch.
And then the SWA spawns out. So it's been around for a minute. It's not like
Yeah.
this is some thing that just happened in the 2000s. This association's been around for years.
Yeah.
It's funny
Well-
because somebody mentioned in the comments that's the same thing. It's kind of like the HOA of the Scotch industry. It really is. It volunteers, kind of hardcore people that got into it and really kind of organize it and oversee it. But then it's turned into more of a trading and
Oh, it's a
liberal
big
and,
budget association.
So when did they officially set the rules for Scotch whiskey?
Ooh.
That's a
Do we
good
know?
I don't
question. That's a
know.
good question.
I don't
Do
know.
you know?
Do you?
I don't. No, I don't know. I
I thought you were
That's the question.
segueing
If
yourself.
I only had an
there.
internet device, I could look it up. No,
Well,
I gotta do it now.
So I find it interesting because in America we have a lot of different lobbying groups. National Restaurant Association, there's Association of Bars and Restaurants.
Yeah.
A lot of the distillers have their own association so
Yep.
that they can go talk to lawmakers and things like that. To me, the SWA is a similar organization, that spawned out of necessity because it's a big dollar business.
Sure.
And they want to make sure that their interests are looked out for within the country that they're established in, and also internationally to make sure that the Scotch whiskey brand, if you will, is protected and taken care of in the right way.
So before we get into what they do as far as protecting and stuff like that, this association, it's made up. It's got a board.
Yep.
It's got members of the association, 70 corporations, we'll say,
Yep.
something close to that nature.
Yep.
And there are rules to become a member, and you and I can't just go be a member.
Well,
right?
No.
and so does each member allow one representative, or do they have like
Well,
multiple?
so that's what I don't know. If they allow these members to vote, do they have a say, or what do they do? What's a membership mean?
So you have to basically pay dues if you're a member,
Okay.
and you're represented by the group. Your dues are based off of your production volume. So
Oh, I wondered how they did that.
and
That's crazy.
And it's nice because if you've got a big distillery that's putting out millions of liters of booze, and then you've got Edredor,
Right.
who's
For
not,
people.
So it's kind of like the senior
It's
citizen
not the-
discount.
well, it's
So
it's not fair to
joined,
charge.
we'd owe $3
Well, it's not.
because we
Give me a
have.
quarter.
It's not fair
Give
to
him a quarter.
charge every.
Call someone who cares.
It's not fair to charge McAllen $100 to join. And it's not fair to charge Edredor $3 million to join.
Right,
So I think that it's fair that they do it off of
like
their
the
production
UN.
volume. And then once you are established, they've got a managing committee, basically. I think there's 16
Stability
members.
Council, yeah.
Yeah.
A council.
And then they've got committees below that are in
Correct.
charge of various things. So I'm thinking that it's kind of like Congress. If you're a member of the SWA, you probably have. And it looked like, based off of who's on the committee, it's all executives.
Right.
I only saw a couple of people who were actually involved with distilling. A lot of people were involved in logistics and marketing and
CEOs of
vice
Diageo
president
stuff.
of certain things.
Right.
And a lot of people had a pretty big resume to go with their title.
Very true.
And, which is nice because a lot of people that I saw had been involved in a lot of different countries in various aspects with their job. So you
All
know
in
that
the
they had,
spirits
yeah, and so
industry.
you know that they had contacts. You know, if I worked in Australia for 5 years, you know, for
helpful.
Diageo at some place down there, and now I'm in Scotland. Well, I've got contacts still in Australia. So if we're going down there to talk to people, you know, let's stop by and talk to this guy. So it helps if you're doing something like that to know who to talk to if you're having a problem or,
So
or an
that's the
issue.
governing board. They have 36 employees broken up under 5 different silos in their organization, and I forget what
Yep.
the 5 are. It's like
I've got them.
do you?
There's one industry
yes,
that talks about, you know, they're, I think that's the committee I'd want to be on, because they involve development of grains. They're talking about, you know, occupational safety in the manufacturing plants. They're talking about, you know, there's certain excise controls, you know, development of, I think they were the one that sponsored the work on how alcohol affects whiskey and the level of glycol in the surface of the whiskey as you add water content and things
sounds
like
like a
that.
Dr. Scotch thing.
So they're doing
Totally.
research on
They're doing
the
research on
product.
whiskey and whiskey making, and so that's a cool one. Then they have an international side, a legal side, a strategy and communication, and then corporate services. So that's kind of the admin side. So international is talking about customs, importation, taxation. That's where they go through the whole EU Brexit thing, and they're working through how
Makes sense.
Scotch whiskey is going to deal with that on an international scale. Legal is like the group that sued that the company in Virginia that did a Virginia Highland. And
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Virginia
yeah.
Highland
Yeah,
whiskey.
yeah.
So
Right,
they sued
right.
them for using the word Highland.
Right.
So there's
Right.
the kind of legal side to help reinforce their brand.
Right.
Because the Scotch whiskey
You have to
is a
protect it.
brand that you
Right.
have to enforce as well.
IP.
Strategy and communications does more of that political engagement, and then that's like member services and IT and information management. That's their kind of thing. So it's broken into different committees. Industry ones, I think that's where I'd want to be on if we ever got
So
a chance to be on
that's
board.
the organization. That's
Yep.
your leadership, your board, your
Structure,
council,
yeah.
your structure, your members, your employees and staff. Now, what do they really do, right? So when you were talking about it earlier, and I
so
wanted
they maintain lobbying groups in various positions in the UK. So you know, Westminster, they've got a group that you know can lobby. You know, and a lot of it is you know taxation, or if there's any kind of rules that the
Trade
government's
agreements.
enforcing on stuff.
Like a tariff from the U.S.
Right.
They get upset
Well,
with that.
So that doesn't have anything to do with the UK government, but when
No.
the UK government goes over to the US to talk to representatives from our government about, you know, trade disputes and things like that, part of the delegation is SWA
Members.
representation,
members.
right?
And so they're coming over to talk to not only government people to talk to them about, you know, what can be done about the tariffs, but they're also talking to trade representatives over here that, you know, either importers or, you know, distillery people for bourbon, because, you know, bourbon's got a tariff going the other way into
Right.
the EU. So,
Yep.
you know, there's a lot of interconnectedness. And so they're talking to the people that they know to try and get, you know, some kind of resolution to that. But, you know, it's not just the U.S., it's everywhere. You know, it's new markets that they're going into. If they're sending a delegation to China, you know, or maybe a country that doesn't really have a whole lot of Scotch whiskey representation, you know, what does that look like importing it? You know, who do we need to talk to get this into your country? Protections for the brand, so you don't have, you know, Joe Schmo down the street that's
Copywriting it.
Yeah, that's distilling, you know, some stuff out in the hills and bringing it into town and
Calling
it
it
Scotch.
Glenlivet.
Or like if you are in Korea and you get Scotch Blue thinking you've got Johnny Walker Blue, it's not the same stuff.
Well,
Really?
That's
Really?
one of the big things they go after. I mean, their intellectual property. They go after all those people that say, listen, they're basically policing the name Scotch and what you can do with it. Because if you think you're calling Scotch anywhere else but Scotland, you're wrong. So if it implies some way or form of a Scotch, like one of the things that I read today that
That's right.
there's some kind of whiskey
What you got?
producing
Blue Beast?
kit
No, I already had that.
that they're producing now. They're selling in UK that they're going after because it's like you can't. That's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't say Scotch on it, but you can't produce
Maybe one of
whiskey at your
those.
house and then call it, you know. So they're going after and protecting the Scotch, the name itself.
So let's talk about the technical document, and this will probably geek you out.
Yeah,
right?
see, I didn't look at that
wait,
today.
okay.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
I was gonna say we're missing a big aspect of what they do. You're gonna
So
go
as a trade organization, they're making a they're establishing rules and giving a level playing field to everybody that wants to make Scotch. If you want to make Scotch, here's what you need to do, right? You need to follow these guidelines to get it done. On the one hand, that's nice. As a consumer, I know what I'm getting in my glass when I can look at the label, I can see what's going on. So from that aspect, it's comforting to know what I'm going to be pouring in my bottle, right?
Yep.
The downside is it kind of stifles innovation a little bit.
Yep.
You know, if you want to call it Scotch, you're going to have to follow these rules. Kind of is what it is. You know, and is it a little stuffy? Yeah.
Yeah, I want to put purple shutters on my house, but the HOA won't allow it.
It's the same idea.
Exact same reason. I mean, it's the same
Right.
concept.
And it is, you know, and I don't want your purple shutters across my street. I'm just saying.
It lowers the value of my house.
Right.
So move out.
So, I mean, I kind of get both sides of this, and I think that it would be nice if they were a little more flexible, but it's a...
They showed some flex.
Well, but here's the thing. It's a gradual change, right? It's a bureaucracy.
It's a slow
Anytime
evolution.
you want to get something through a bureaucracy, it's going to take time and
slow.
pressure to kind of turn the boat a
And
little
they're,
bit,
they
right?
didn't just establish last week. I mean, they've been around for a long time, so
Right.
they've got old ways. It's going
And-
to take time to
Well,
kind of get.
and they
through
don't
some
want
red
to
tape.
just say, okay, you know what? I know 2 of these places want to do these weird caskings, right? Like it was filled with tar,
Tequila.
and we're gonna dump some scotch in it and see what happens. See if it's any
Might be
good.
good.
Right? And yeah, you know, and so I think, you know, I mean, that's part of protecting the brand. They want to make sure that what's coming out. It's the same reason why it takes so long to approve a barley strain. You know what I mean? It's a
Years.
decade-long process to get a barley strain approved because they want to make sure that it's producing enough alcohol, that it's producing, you know, the right flavors, and there's not like problems in the mechanics. I mean, you talked about that, like just the industrial process of utilizing that. You know, is there too much protein in here? Is it going to foul the equipment up? So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it that as consumers we don't really think about.
Never
But
think about it.
for an industry, you know, they've got to make decisions, and you know, I think it's nice that it's not just the big names making those calls, because some of the people on the committee, I was like, oh, well, that's a really small distillery.
So,
Yeah.
question
So
for
it's
you
good.
guys. So does that, talking about that, so every distillery, then Macallan to Ardbeg to whoever, do they have to make? We're gonna make a new bottle. Do they have to go through SWA to kind of get approval for everything?
Not new bottle.
If it's so, it depends. if it's something that is just using tried and true techniques, if you're dumping stuff into a sherry butt, then you're probably fine. If you're doing anything that's like new or
Not normal, typical stuff.
unusual,
Okay.
like if it's something a little bit out of the ordinary, then
Stretching the boundaries.
then they have an approval process that you go through, that you submit, and they come out and they inspect and like follow your process, and then they can
So
put
that-
their, and it's like they come out every 2 years to inspect and see what's going on. So even after the distillation, and you know, they follow along with the caskings and what you're doing in the process before you put it in bottles.
But the follow-up to that is, do they come and inspect regular processes?
Well, that's so. John Glacier, what is it, Spice Tree?
Right.
That apparently didn't follow the guidelines,
Is it
and
Spice?
they had to.
No, stranger and
Stranger and Stranger, because they couldn't
No.
call it Scotch because it has to be.
The original version of Spice Tree, there was something about it that they didn't follow the rules, and they had to actually recall the bottles.
yes,
Oh, I think you're right. I mean, it's the second version of
That's
Spice
right.
Tree.
yeah.
So I don't know. I don't remember the details on that, and I'm
You're
sure
right.
these guys can talk.
Somebody's
through
going to have it on
But so
comment.
that's the question: is did they think they were within limits, and the
Maybe.
SWA said, you're really not.
But that's also one of the things he likes. I mean, I know he appreciates SWA, but he also likes to play with them.
He
more
does
because
play with
Stranger
them
and
well.
Stranger is a good indication of that. Like, it's all Scotch except for one wee bit.
1%. So now it's a
But he didn't
Spirit.
call it
It's a spirit.
Scotch.
No, he called
And
it
so that's
a
how he gets
spirit.
around.
So
right,
it's
malt
and-
spirit or something.
And you know what? I know it's kind of, you know, thumbing your nose at
He's
whatever.
getting big enough till you can do that.
right?
That's for sure.
But I think that you know, everybody on the front end and the back end understands what's going on,
wood
right?
staves, that's
So I think that
That's right. Wood stays.
you know, there's a lot of those kinds of things, like stuff that you're like, really, that's a thing, but they laid out the rules for a reason.
Well,
right?
but the thing that's interesting about that is that had John and others not pushed it, do you think we'd have mezcal casks right now?
No.
I mean, that's the thing.
Maybe. People, I mean, these guys are desperate for sales too. So.
People are pushing the limit because, you know, Why not try it?
Well,
Why not?
I think that
explore
I think it's to the point that it's a marketing thing now. You know, like what else can we give them?
Interstate, that's right.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But I think that there has to be some rules and some established precedent to say this is going to be drinkable, right?
Well,
I mean,
Well, see what you've got in the U.S. There's less regulation about that. So Zach just brought it up. I was going to say Maker's Mark, Maker's 46. They do a lot of stave work, and they've got, and you can actually go and design a barrel with Maker's Mark, where you can pick the barrel, you can pick what staves you want in it, what char, what wood, and you can create your own barrel from them, and call it bourbon or whatever they call it at the time.
That's good to see.
Where, but it's a different. There are fewer rules for that kind of thing in the U.S. and so that's why you get peachwood and all this kind of things. Sometimes they're good. Sometimes maybe don't
now,
work so well.
Eric Waite brings
yeah.
up an interesting topic because they were, you know, the SWA pursues legal action around the world on producers falsely labeling their whiskey Scotch.
Right.
But they also overreact and tried to sue Glen Breton in Nova Scotia, Canada, for using the term Glen.
Sure.
Well, that was like the Virginia Highland.
And so
That's
I
right.
think that there's a little bit of that's like, okay, well now you're going
You're a little too touchy.
little bit too far, right? Like you have lock on Scotch, not Glen. How about that? Like we're named Glen.
Right.
And so I think that there's some stuff that they need to, dial back. But on the other hand, they've got $1 billion industry that they're trying to
protect.
and so
Well,
absolutely.
they've got to, push back on those boundaries and make sure that people aren't encroaching at all.
And you pay a premium for Scotch
Right?
over bourbon, over American
Oh,
whiskey,
absolutely.
over French whiskey,
So-
over
well,
Taiwanese whiskey.
Some would argue different now, but yes, I
But
mean,
let's
bourbon's gone up quite a bit.
let's not kid ourselves and think that the bourbon industry, the American whiskey industry, and the Canadian don't have similar associations that
Right.
are. I mean, it's they're looking out for the best. I mean, this is actually one of Scotland's treasures. You look at the numbers, the raw numbers.
Yeah.
It's crazy. The money that is
A lot
involved
of money.
with
A
the
lot of money.
Scotch industry in Scotland and the UK in general it's a gold mine. They cannot afford to let it go south.
No.
So I brought the trivia question to you guys earlier. I'm not sure if you were here or not. The export, the number, how much money do you think it makes for the UK in exporting Scotch every year?
I didn't know that. So that's a good question.
You guys know now, right?
I can't say because you
wanna
already
guess?
told me. I'm gonna have to find out what this guy's drinking.
Oh, it's got to be billions.
Yeah.
Wow. So I was reading that there's.
It's 170 pounds per second or minute or something. I can't remember what it was.
Well, I
Per
know it's
second,
42
I think.
bottles.
I think it's second.
42 bottles per minute or something like that being sold. So yeah, I don't know what's it.
4.3 billion pounds, which is around 5.5 million.
Billion. 5.5 billion.
Thank you. Yes.
And I did see. So SWA also has stats on their website if you want to look through
Dude,
that.
$5.5 billion a year on Scotch. Now, a lot of that is blends, I would think.
Nine out of every 10 bottles coming of Scotch is a blended.
Is
blended
it
Scotch.
really? I don't fit that stat.
No, that's because France is the #1 consumer of by volume of Scotch whiskey, but not by value, because they're
France?
drinking lots of blends.
Yep.
Tons of blends.
So let's talk about this technical document that they have.
Okay, yeah, we get back to that.
So the reason that they have this technical document is because
Put it back.
if you have a product that is produced in a geographic area, all right?
Okay.
So let's call it bourbon.
Okay.
Right?
So Kentucky.
no,
right?
no,
But
you don't need to do
but
bourbon in Kentucky.
well, you can't make bourbon in Brazil.
It's anywhere in the U.S. though, right?
Right. So Scotch in Scotland, if you're making it in that area, now you have to have a technical document that specifies not only that it has to be made here, but what it is. You can't just go make it in your bathtub in Scotland.
And call it Scotch.
Right. It's got to be produced in a specific way. It has to have specific characteristics in order for it to be labeled as Scotch. And so this 90-page plus document lays out all of the technical specifications that you have to follow in order to call your beverage Scotch.
So if any of our subscribers are tuning in from Scotland right now and you've got the urge to start distilling some Scotch, we'll get you this document. You can go to the SWA's website, download it, and there's your starting manual. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, it's very detailed, like really detailed.
I know it's
But,
dry.
but it has to be because it's basically a legal precedent for this is what Scotch whiskey is, right? So, I mean, this is the document that when that distillery puts Highland on their label, they bring over here when they sue them and say, it has to be this.
Mm-hmm.
This is what it has to be. And so they can't label their stuff with our stuff because it's not part of the
But
technical
Highland
doc.
isn't a right term. That's the thing.
Shut your mouth, Michael. Hey, so for our podcasters, we've talked about it a couple of times, the whole bottle. What was the deal? What was the story behind the Highland? I know that basically is it a bourbon somewhere? Is it Kansas or Kentucky?
So
Virginia, I thought.
It was Virginia, and they were distilling some whiskey, and they were blending it with Scotch, with
Yeah.
a Highland Scotch. And so what they called it is a Virginia Highland whiskey or something like that. And the SWA blew up that they were using the word Highland.
Right.
Well, there are Highlands in Virginia too. I mean, that's
Right.
not just, it's a geographic term.
right.
But they intentionally use Highland because it is blended with a Highland Scotch. So
The SWA got.
And so I think they were able to continue to sell that bottling, but no more after that. I
Yeah,
think
you're
it's
done.
kind of what it came down to.
And you know, I think I mean, at the end of the day, it's not a government entity. It's a trade association.
But
right?
it's still powerful.
Right.
Oh,
they've
it's
got
very
a
powerful.
lot of money behind it and a lot of reason to protect their product.
Yeah, I can't imagine
So-
what McAllen pays for dues. I can't.
$4.3
So
billion worth of
honestly,
protection.
if you want an idea, go look at their board of directors.
Yep.
Go look at the board of directors and the resume behind those people. Like you said,
It's big money.
These are not people that are just coming off the street and saying, "Hey, I need a little freaking volunteer work on my resume." These people are at the top of major corporations like Diageo and
Yep.
Edrington and whatnot.
Yep.
And those companies are pumping in money because the SWA needs the firepower to be able to make waves. And they do. They've
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting when you kind of look at the structure and how they do their thing. And, you know,
Smells so good.
I get it. You know, I mean, it's the same with any trade association. If you go to
Sure.
National Restaurant Association, it's all CEOs of the largest, like, you know, it's McDonald's.
Right.
And, you know, I mean,
Right.
it's people that have billions of dollars behind them and have money that they want to protect. So, you know, it just kind of is what it is.
So-
I like how Sub 10 says in the UK, we don't call it Scotch, we call it whiskey.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Been to Scotland, and I know that's what it's referred to.
until you go to court.
Well, I just want to live in Scotland so I can just call it whiskey and not have to refer to it as
Right.
Scotch. 'Cause I'm so sick of all these people on.
You're just going to make it in your bathtub anyway.
That's
What are you
right.
fooling,
Damn
man?
right.
So I think at the end of the day, you know, it's an interesting, like, you guys should all go to their website and just kind of check them out a little bit. It's interesting to look because that's the governing body for our favorite beverage.
They're powerful.
I mean, they dictate what casks this stuff
Yep.
goes in, how old it has to be, you know, what ABVs it has to be. Like, all of that stuff is detailed out by these guys.
Even the transport of it all, right? They have to go through that with, you know, we were talking to Steph about that, you know, in our interview with her on our podcast, and she was talking about having, you know, all the OPs and SPA and all these different places going through the SWA to make sure that they're following regulations and that with COVID and how it's all kind of being set up. So
Yeah, I mean, they honestly, they are a lot stronger than people probably think and have much more influence than you think they do. And if you really want to understand their influence, when you're looking on their website and you're looking at these, who are we, looking at their board of directors or their CEO, their leadership team or whatever, look at their resumes and see where they come from. You know, their current CEO is not somebody that even comes from the freaking spirits industry. She comes from government. She comes from trade
Right.
association
Yeah.
and government, right?
Scotch is just an extra.
Right. They pulled her in when she was done with her political aspirations and said, "You've got pull, you've
Yeah.
got connections."
So you have
and
political
network."
connection. Here's a paycheck.
Right.
Boom.
Come lead us. I mean, it's big. It's big money. It's big power, but it's also got, I think, the right intentions to protect my favorite beverage. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, do they overreach sometimes? Absolutely. But, I mean, a lot of a lot of things like that happen.
No, I can't wear
Sure,
a jacket.
you're absolutely right. No, you
So
better.
there's a comment from Tom R asking if Dr. Scotch is okay. He does not have COVID. He's not coming today because Dr. Scotch likes his analytical tools better, and SWA doesn't really fit tonight.
Well, there's
Maybe
one
it-
category that you could have talked about, I guess, but
Well, there
That's-
could have been
that's good.
occupational safety. No, I don't know about
I don't know
that.
about that one. But
Well, I think we kind of beat SWA down to death.
we
I
talked
do
more than I
wanna-
thought we
5
did, to
minutes
be
left.
honest.
Yeah.
with you.
honestly want to make one point that you texted earlier, and I was actually pleased. When it comes to it all, we actually know one of the
Yeah.
board members.
So
We
I'm,
do.
I'm looking through the website today, and I wanted to look at the executive team. And Patricia from SWA Whiskey.
She's a board
Is a
member.
board member. So she was an observational board member until March, and then they voted her in. So I guess it's kind of like an internship, maybe, is
Yeah,
what it sounded
intern
like.
board,
Like,
yeah.
Sure,
here's
right.
what we do, just to make sure that you're cool with it and you're okay with the duties that you're going to have to perform. And then I guess they voted her in March, I believe. So I mean,
We were supposed to see her in June.
yep. So
Yes.
she's a super fun lady. So
She's great.
and the nice thing about her is that of all the resumes that I looked through, a lot of the people were. It was more
Corporate.
an industrial corporate background.
Right.
It was logistics. It was marketing. it
Supply
was
chain,
supply
all that
chain
shit.
stuff. And she was one of the few that was on there that was like, I make whiskey.
Right.
Like,
I came and turned
Let me
this
talk to
distillery
you
around.
about and they were very specific
Forget what
about
you
her
heard.
qualifications. And so I mean it was good to see a name like that, and their distillery puts out some good stuff, so no doubt about that. So it's nice to know that we know somebody on
That
there,
Fumara they put
and
out.
we may have to try and get her on a podcast.
That'd
I think that'd be
talk to her
fun.
about
I think
this
she'd
because
appreciate it,
it'd be-
especially with COVID
it'd be
going around. We
interesting.
can't do anything. It'd be a great opportunity for us to get out.
And I'd like to ask somebody that's on the executive board more questions about what they do. How do you spend your
Oh,
time?
that would be a lot of fun.
Obviously,
That'd be an
you're
insight
not
into
meeting
that.
every day.
No, they meet
you
4
know?
times a year. I
Yeah,
think,
it's
is
not
what
that
it
often.
is.
And so, what do you focus on? How do you choose those topics? What's important to the industry? Because obviously this is an industry group. Why do you focus on certain things over others? And who controls that? So
There's a question from everyone: hindering transparency rules. Why?
That
Why are
is
you doing
something
that?
that I would love to talk to them about. And I think that comes down to a lot of, that it's a slow turn, right? It's people on the outside that are pushing the boundaries, like Compass Box, that are like, why I want to put this on my box. What do you mean I can't do that? Like if those guys don't want to put what they're putting in the bottle, that's fine. But I'd like to put every single ingredient on my list.
So it very well may be, until you ask, it very well may be, a 30 or 40-year-old thing.
Right.
Somebody 30 or 40, whoever was the executive, the chairman of the board 30 or 40 years ago put that rubber stamp on, and it's just, it takes that long to turn the ship.
Well,
and no
well,
one's
And
pushed
it
the
might
issue.
also
I don't
be
know.
it might also be that a smaller company like Compass Box can track all that stuff. If you went to
Oh, that's a good
if
point.
you went to like Whitehorse or Dewar's and you're
Oh.
like, okay, well, you're gonna have to list out every distillery and every ingredient that's in your bottle, and they're like we just
I just put 4,000
Well,
casks
It's called
into
a
that.
vat for a reason.
Yeah, I mean, we put all this together to match it to a specific flavor profile. Not, I don't know if it's going to be this
Right.
the next time
And
we put
I
it in
don't
there.
want to put a batch number on my bottle
Right.
because every
And,
batch is
and
different.
so, I mean, I'm sure that there's
And
some
I
of
don't
that
want to
stuff,
hand
too.
you the recipe from.
Well, a lot of it's
Well,
trade
that's a good
secret.
point,
Yeah.
too.
I'm not gonna tell you.
And also, they don't necessarily want to tell that their
Right.
Johnny Walker White Label is 95% grain whiskey and 1% 5-year-old malt. I mean, and that
Is
that
it
may-
1%?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
But I mean,
So-
I'm sure there's a lot
Yeah.
of those kinds of considerations, and so they, it's a trade association. They've got to take everybody's view into account and try and do what's right for the brand itself.
Sure.
So it's a tough call, man. I mean, I don't envy 'em.
Bureaucracy.
We would like to see more transparency, but as an industry, they
Well, I
may
think-
not be able to.
So
or
I
willing to
will talk.
provide
So
that.
I work in a regulated industry, and the fewer regulations you have, the more flexibility you have. So when we would register a manufacturing process, we want to register what's important, but not everything that we do, because as a business, you want to increase yields, you want to increase profits, you want to increase
Sure.
margins, you want to change the process to use less expensive solvents, all those kind of
Efficiency.
things, efficiency. So if you register every bit of your process, then I have no room to work.
Right. You just gave away the farm.
And so now I've registered this, so I might as well stop spending any time improving it, getting it more efficient, getting it cheaper for the customer, or anything like that, because there's nothing I can do there.
Right.
So by minimizing that registration on the
So you put in the basics and not the full.
exactly. Plus, again, it becomes public,
Right.
and so now anybody can take my recipe and make my whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think
Fair
John's the only person that's doing it, right?
Well,
But
and at the
even
end of the
he's
day,
vague. I mean,
he does.
fairly.
There's a little bit of vagueness, and
Please
there's
take an exact sample or
it's
ounces,
you can
etc.
also question he's being vague because of the rules of the SWA.
I think that's more
Or
that,
he's
yeah.
being vague because at the end of the day, you don't want to give 100% of your recipe. I mean, look at Tesla as an example. If Tesla just put out there exactly how they did this, how do you think it would fare?
They actually do sell their patents, or the patents are free, aren't they? At least they were for a while.
Not 100% of them. I mean,
Yeah.
at
There's
some
no
point in
way
time-
they're going to give everything, but
You
they're going to give enough at that because it creates more
Sure.
marketing for them.
But at the end of the day, you don't want to give. You
that's-
put a lot of money into R&D. You put
Yeah.
a lot of money into figuring this recipe for this bottle out, and now you. I
But
have to
let's
write
be
it
fair to
down.
John too. He's a smart businessman. He knows marketing. That's also a pull.
Sure,
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to buy something because
Sure.
they are being transparent,
sure.
and it's,
And
good.
People do like that. I mean,
It's
I
good.
like it to an extent, but I also appreciate the fact that they deserve the right to remain to keep their recipe. They made it.
That's true.
I don't know. It's honestly, this was a
11 o'clock,
way
dude. Well,
bigger
that's great.
discussion.
Man, we
in the
killed an
SWA
hour.
than
Well,
I
there's a
thought it was gonna be.
lot of interesting comments on here. So, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of opinions, positive and negative, and there's definitely some stuff about the SWA that I don't appreciate. You know,
Sure.
but it's kind of one of those deals that you get trade associations or government entities or quasi-government entities, and you kind of have to work within their boundaries.
Yeah.
You know, because you've got to, you know, if it's my business, if I'm selling $1 billion worth of Scotch a year, yeah, I'm gonna spend some money to make sure that you guys don't mess things up for me. You know, and so
an investment.
and you know, every industry has things that, you know, observers from the outside are like, why in the hell would you do it that way? That doesn't make any sense at all. And from the inside, you're like, well, I have to do it that
makes
way.
total
It's
sense.
the only way
Right.
you can do this. You
Monday
know?
Monday quarterbacking. is that what
Yeah,
they call it? I
and,
mean,
and
yeah.
so at the end of the day, I kind of give them a little bit of latitude because I don't know what goes on behind the scenes, really at all in that industry. There's a ton of stuff behind the scenes, and you know, I'm in the industry. I'm an end user, but I know people that are actively involved at a lot of different levels. And there's so many different regulations and things that they have to deal with that I never in 100 years even considered. So, you know, there's some stuff that I'm like, you know what, okay, you know, I'm going to take it as a grain of salt that that's just kind of the way it has to be.
Well,
Very good.
this was cool. This went way deeper than I thought it was going to go, guys, especially for the amount of information that you can find out
We
there
didn't
on
touch
the
the
internet.
surface, to be honest, but
no,
we did a
no,
pretty
we
good
didn't.
job.
Yeah,
We
we
actually-
hit their website and discussed it, but we didn't go to.
I'm still impressed
Okay.
with how far we got down with actually the amount of information we were able to get. So I hope that everyone that's listening on podcast found this interesting and enough to go and look. Go out there, click their website, check them out, see who they are.
They've got a lot of information on there.
Right.
Really.
If you're a bourbon drinker, just a regular whiskey drinker of all sorts, go check out industries and other bourbon industries, American whiskey industries, Canadian. These associations exist and see who they are because they influence your favorite beverage,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
Fun stuff, and this is our heart, right? Honestly, I looked into joining. How can we join? We can't, right? I was like, Scotch
Not
Dummies
unless we-
needs to be a member,
Not
right?
unless
But
you
we
buy a
can't.
distillery.
Well,
buy a
we're
distillery, then
we're
you
still
can-
working on that, Sean.
We make 1 barrel a year. Here's our $20.
Yeah. Right.
Can I be on one of the
Anyway,
committees? Can I please?
Anything else? I don't. We're gonna shut it down here, and I had a good show. I had a
was
really
fun.
good conversation,
Good time.
Sean. Thank you.
Thank you, podcasters, for listening. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Appreciate you guys. We love you guys, and we will see you next week at the same time.
Yep.
Same
Cheers,
Time
guys.
for the Patreon
Cheers,
after show.
man.
Lunch,
Yeah,
guys.
Patreon after show.
See
I'm
you
out.
guys.